Yes, sports are emotionally exhausting, but like Wolf Blitzer and our producer extraordinaire, Stephen Bondo, they will rise again. The Bills will be back. Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, but we had two games, Mike, on Sunday, NFC and AFC Championship. What are we going to discuss today?
Well, I think the outcry, Dean, from the fans is with the Bucs and the Packers, and it's the Packers fans that are concerned. And we'll talk about the big pass interference call inside of 2 minutes of the game, a difference maker, as the Packers are beaten by the Bucs, and King gets called for the DPI. And then we'll go back earlier and talk about Murphy Bunting on a big interception by the Bucs. Did he get away with a holding penalty? We'll talk about how things got a little chippy in that Bills-Chiefs game, and Bill Vinovich had to take charge. We'll talk about the review that went on in that game too, near the end of the first half, and it was reviewed, but should have been reviewed. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Super Bowl crew that's been assigned to work Super Bowl 55. But let's go to the play that has, or really the two plays, but the first play that has most people talking on Twitter. And that's the pass interference called against Kevin King inside of 2 minutes of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I think the plays are related. There were a lot of things that went on in this game, and it had the feel, and we even mentioned it on the broadcast, right? They're letting them play. And you hear that from time to time. And then the end of the game, obviously critical situation, Tampa trying to run out the clock, third down. If Green Bay gets the stop, they're going to get an opportunity to get the ball back down by one score. And King gets called for the pass interference foul. It is a foul. To me, there's no question. It's a foul. He grabs the undershirt. You can see the stretch. It does, whether you think Chris Godwin maybe played it up a little bit, he certainly was affected. And it was a foul. I think the issue and the outcry stems from the idea that, okay, you let them play the entire game. There were some calls that were debatable. Maybe a flag could have been thrown in certain situations, but they appeared to just let them play. And now when you have that mindset, in my opinion, it becomes harder to throw that flag in a critical situation, and it becomes harder for people to understand that. Look, if we didn't have this idea that they were letting everything go or letting them play, I don't think there's as big an outcry about this call. It is a foul. It was the right call by the back judge who watched the play, signaled incomplete, and then threw the flag. But again, when you have this idea that you're going to let things go or let them play throughout the game, I think it becomes harder for people to understand or justify that call late in that critical situation.
Yeah, any other stretch of the jersey like that at any time during the game would have been called, period. I get it. The let them play notion, where it comes from, I'm not necessarily sure, because they're not told that, other than the fact that this whole year it's been make the call clear and obvious. And the ones that the Packer fans and a lot of people that aren't Packer fans are complaining about are grabs at the shoulder where there isn't that shoulder, that jersey stretch like that. But it is a clear foul. And to me, anytime that jersey gets stretched like that, if it's before the pass, it's going to get called defensive holding. And if it's during the pass and there is a restriction, and Johnson, to me, did have a step taken away, it's going to be called. But I understand the frustration of the fans. And I understand a point that you just made. And I think it was the problem in the Rams-Saints game, back when the missed call at the end of the game, complacency sets in when you let too much go. And then when it explodes on you at the end of the game, like it did in that championship game in New Orleans, you're almost not prepared to make the call. And that's the danger with trying to officiate to a different standard, if in fact that's what's going on. But to me, look, this is, dare I say, an easy call. But let's go ahead and just go right back to earlier on the Murphy Bunting interception. Is that defensive holding, Dean?
Well, you look at that play, and to me, there's no question Murphy Bunting grabs Lazard's jersey. You can see, if you go back and watch that play, he grabs the shoulder pad. There's a stretch of the jersey because you can see the shoulder pad underneath the jersey. then it becomes an issue. Okay, did it have an impact on the play? To me, he pulled himself into the play. He made the interception. To me, it was pass interference. We can debate that. But again, when you don't make that call, and there were others where you probably could have thrown a flag and could have certainly supported it, then I think that call at the end becomes much harder for people to understand. And I'll go back to something you just said. You were head of officiating. I was in charge of officiating. There was never at any point that either one of us told the officials to let them play. That's more of a term that you hear broadcasters or media say. It was never let them play. You don't want your officials to be overly technical. You don't want to call ticky-tack fouls. You want to make sure officials see the entire act and throw the flag when a foul is evident. This year, though, it feels different this year. It felt more intentional, that this idea of clear and obvious, when you go from 16 fouls a game the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and historically it's been around that number, and I know we've had outliers from here and there. When you go from 16 to 13, and when you go from offensive holding being called 3.5 times a game to 1 time a game, that feels more intentional. It feels like we're letting more things go. And one season isn't necessarily going to have a detrimental impact on the game overall. But I think if it continues, it could. And that to me is something that the competition committee needs to look at. But again, Murphy Bunting, I thought it was a foul. I know you probably didn't. It's debatable. But when you go into that game and you don't call anything, it's going to be harder at the end of the game to justify a foul.
Yeah, no, I think it's a foul, Dean. I do. And I think that, if you go back to last year, I think you see less than that called, quite frankly. But it's a foul. But again, in the standard of this clear and obvious, I don't know it rises to that. But it's totally different, though. It's totally different than the jersey stretch, as you saw on the pass interference play by King. Totally different. And, when officials are told, make it clear and obvious, then they're going to look for things to make it clear and obvious. And it's so easy, by the way, when you look at pictures like this, and it's easy to see a grab, but in real time, it's a little more difficult. You made the best point so far, though, is that Murphy Bunting, he actually kept himself in the play here by doing this. And he propelled himself, to me, to make the interception. So I get the frustration from the fans. I clearly get the frustrations from the fans, but I also think that, people say, well, there's always less fouls in the playoffs. I mean, are you officiating to a different standard? Sometimes not. I mean, look at that Tampa Bay Green Bay game. I mean, how many snap infractions were there? When you talk about false starts, defense offside, those types of things, there were no false starts in the game. There was 1 defensive offside and 1 encroachment. And the encroachment, by the way, was intentional. I mean, that was an intentional foul. So I do think that sometimes when you're one and done, the teams have a sense that they play a little bit cleaner.
No question. And we've always looked at that. Why do fouls always go from, 14, 15, 16 a game to maybe 12 or 13 in the playoffs? And why is that? And you mentioned a couple of things, right? The teams, the better teams are in the playoffs. There's more at stake. They're more disciplined. They're less likely to take those after the play, after the whistle fouls. But I still think there is some psychology to this. And there is in the mentality of the official, and you know this because you were on the field, I bring less attention to myself when I don't throw the flag, right? And in some officials' minds, they think that by throwing the flag, I'm inserting myself in the game, and I don't want to be the difference maker. And we've always preached against that, to say by not throwing your flag in situations, you can be a difference maker. And sometimes it's that mentality and the individual official that may think a certain way. And I think that has something to do with why every year we see fouls go down during the postseason.
Yeah.
But let's move on. Let's go to, and we had a 50% chance to talk about the Bills this week. And so we knew we were going to have to find something. So Bondo, our producer, wants us to talk about, at the end of the game, a lot of people were upset about the offsetting fouls after the play. Mike, what happened, and why is the rule offsetting fouls in this situation?
Yeah, well, listen, basically, I was disappointed at where this game got at this point, and I was disappointed in the Bills. Sorry to our executive producer, Stephen Bondo, but to me, this was Josh Allen losing his cool and throwing the ball at the defender, which then led to what Bill lineman would do: protect your quarterback. And then what it led to was a 6-minute stoppage, actually. It took 6 minutes to sort this out. And we've talked about this before, because once you call a personal foul, guess who gets involved? Big Brother in New York gets involved, and they can look to see A, if there's an ejection, or B, is there anybody else in this sequence of pushing and shoving and the possibility of fouls that they may have been missed. And so I think it was Tony Romo that said, hey, or maybe it was Jim Nantz that said, hey, I will tell you, I got to give credit to the officials. They got everybody involved. Well, yeah, because they could go back and look at the video and add on to get all the people involved. So that part's good. But then nobody can kind of understand the notion of, okay, wait a minute, unsportsmanlike conduct, Buffalo, personal foul, Buffalo, personal foul, Buffalo, personal foul, 1, Kansas City. They offset. And I get the frustration. And I'm starting to think that maybe college is maybe a little bit better on how they enforce their penalties. But if you can't sometimes determine the order of these, what's going to do with the penalty yardage? Would it offset? Would it not offset? Would it end up the yardage be the same? But I think that you want to get away from a dead ball period, from one dead ball period of having multiple fouls being called, and then all of a sudden setting up 1st and 75. I mean, I don't think that anybody would want to see that. But Dean, I mean, I get the frustration. Is it possibly time to look at how the NFL enforces dead ball penalties? We know, for example, in college, a live ball foul and then a dead ball foul, like a hold on the offense, and then a personal foul in the defense, both of those get enforced because they came in different time frames. Is it time for us to look at that?
We did look at that when we met with the competition committee, I think in maybe 2014, 2015. And look, here's the deal. The college rule, colleges would have enforced this play the same because everything happened after the play. It was all dead ball action. Colleges enforced the live ball and the dead ball foul differently, whereas the NFL combines those and just offsets them. College, like you said, enforces them in the order they occurred. You mentioned that it took 6 minutes to figure this out. If we're enforcing all of these fouls in the order of their occurrence, this is going to take another 6 minutes. We're going to be sitting here for 12 minutes trying to figure out, okay, Allen fouled first, we'll go 15 against Buffalo, and then we got to go 15 against the Chiefs, and now we got to go 30 against the Bills. Maybe we get into half the distance. Sometimes the pursuit for perfect fairness is at the expense of simplicity and efficiency. And I've always been in the corner. I get it. I understand it's not perfectly fair in this situation, but I've always been in the corner of let's keep it as simple as possible for the majority of situations that happen. And the majority of offsetting dead ball fouls are one on one team, one on the other team. And you do get these handful every year where it's 2 or 3 on one. It doesn't seem fair, but again, for simplicity's sake, I would not be in favor of changing it. And you add a whole nother host of issues when you start doing live ball, dead ball. Is it an automatic first down? It makes it more complicated. And this rule book, where is it in front of me? This rule book is pretty big already. And I don't want to add another 100 pages by changing a bunch of rules, but that's just me. I think offsetting fouls is a basic rule that is important for the game.
I mean, I get it, but it's as complicated anyways. Like you say, we have that mysterious 515 that very seldom shows up. But if you have a simple 5, okay, a simple 5. So that's just a basic false start, offside, no loss of down, no automatic first down. And then you have a personal foul against your opponents. Then your simple 5 goes away and the opponent's personal foul gets enforced. It's complicated. I agree with you. The last thing I would want to do is make it any more complicated, but boy, it just doesn't seem fair. I mean, you said it. It just doesn't seem fair.
Yeah, and there are going to be those situations. Another situation in the game, and this to me is more, this is more, and really where I want to go with this conversation is the play with Josh Allen near the end of the half that got reviewed and changed on the field. Bill Vinovich ruled that he was out of bounds. It went to review. It was changed. And look, we've seen this isn't reviewable. This has never been reviewable when we put replay back in. And the theory is, and that's really where I want to go with this. The theory is that once you put the player out of bounds, then you can't put him back in bounds and extend the play. What if the pass was caught and the runner continued and the receiver ran for 30 yards? Well, the officials are killing it. They're blowing whistles. Players stop. It becomes a player safety issue. So that's why that rule is in place. If you make it reviewable when the pass is incomplete, we talked about this, and I'm sure the league will look at this potentially as a rule change. But then you got to consider, well, is it grounding? All of these other things. So that's why the rule is in place. It's not reviewable. It did go to review. What's the kind of the chain of command there, Mike? How does that happen in that situation?
Well, it never should have happened, period. I mean, period. I mean, it's one thing, and you know that I felt that it was proper and reasonable to suggest that penalty enforcement and rules that you could expect 100% correct rulings from the officials. Judgment, different story. And and this is one, doesn't happen very often, so I wouldn't want to change it because it doesn't happen very often, but it has happened before. And to me, you know, the thing is that it went through 7 officials on the field. It went through 7 alternates that were on the sideline. It went through the replay booth at the stadium, which had a alternate replay official in the booth. And then it goes through New York, you know, New York, who has the ultimate decision-making process. Um, it's unforgivable. I mean, it's just kind of one of those things. I mean, I feel bad for everybody involved, but you know, you just can't have this happen. You know, you have to look at this, and I think they've done a hell of a job in getting alternates involved. I mean, alternates were out on the field, Dean, during all those skirmishes when things
Sure.
got chippy, helping to break things up. But you know, with all the communication, everybody's talking to everybody with the O2O system, O2O for official to official system. Um, it's just, it's a shame that this happened. I mean, and I get in the excitement of the time. I mean, it's easy for me when I was sitting here on the couch with my Tito's and Meyer lemon juice, seeing the play and then wondering, oh my God, what did they do? And Vinny will come out and say, hey, this play is not reviewable, but it's learning. You got to learn from this and try to figure out how it went wrong with everybody, but it is inexcusable.
Yeah, and look, mistakes are going to happen. I made mistakes. You made mistakes. That's going to happen. You talk about judgment versus an application of a rule, right? Rule application, we should be 100%. And, you know, I've been in that situation, and sometimes you can get caught up and you just miss it. And it comes down to process, it comes down to communication. And all anyone would have needed was one little nudge, right? And I've been there. I've been in the booth where somebody says something and it triggers in your mind, oh, wait a minute, this isn't reviewable. And that's all it would have taken. And so it just didn't happen in this situation. And thankfully, it didn't have a big impact on the game. It didn't have a big impact in the situation, but you just hope that you learn from that and you can move on and move forward. So let's move forward. Let's look forward to Super Bowl 55 and the officiating crew. Mike, who's officiating the game? And let's talk about how do they get to this point?
Yeah, well, the main thing is how do you get there, right? And it's all a grading process, grading of your calls that you make or don't make. Other intangibles involved to a little bit of degree, but what you do as an official, you try to get to what they call level 1, the top tier. And if you make the top tier, which is set based on a performance level, if you get to that top tier, you're eligible to work the championship game or the Super Bowl. And from that top tier, they get some discretion, as I know you put in, I think, so that if you look at the officials in the top tier and you look at one that hasn't worked the Super Bowl, you will put that person in the Super Bowl, generally, if they're eligible. And And this year, I think it's interesting because you have two officials working there very first. That's James Coleman right there, who I brought in back, I think, in 2005. And then you got Sarah Thomas that you brought in, Dean. This is her first Super Bowl. Carl Chepper's the second, and the rest of them have all worked the Super Bowl before. But I like the crew. I like the makeup of the crew.
Yeah, I think it's a great crew. And like you mentioned, they're evaluated. They're evaluated by position, right? They're evaluated. Referees are all evaluated in one position group, umpires, down judges, like that. So you basically competing against the other officials at your position. And like you said, the top tier, that's who you choose. The Super Bowl crew, the championship game crews come from that top tier. And rounding out the crew, and obviously Carl Cheffers being the referee, Sarah Thomas, historic first female official ever to work a Super Bowl. So that's an amazing accomplishment. And then we have Fred Bryant working the game, Rusty Baines. We've got Eugene Hall, Dino Paganelli, and Mike Wimmer is the replay official. And they all have had Super Bowl experience. So 7 alternates, you're going to have an entire crew that is there in case of an injury or an emergency or anything else. You're going to have the entire, everybody, New York, they will all be there. The folks in New York will be on site in the replay booth. So you have a lot of different people involved. And ultimately, and I always told the crew, and I'm sure you've told the Super Bowl crews in your time the same thing, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of hoopla, there's a lot leading up to the game. But as soon as that ball kicks off, right, it's just another football game. And it's just going to be 60 minutes, maybe a little bit more, of what you've been doing your entire career. So just enjoy it.
It's interesting because they've been working games with basically no fans too, and now all of a sudden they're going to have 21,000 fans in Tampa Bay, and it will be pretty vocal because what do you got? Tampa Bay, the Bucks playing in their own home stadium, so it's hard to settle down, Dean. I know in my very short on-field career, the one playoff game that I had, it took a while to settle down. It really did because the pressure is unbelievable, but I will say this, as we talked about being evaluated, no official gets evaluated more than NFL officials. And I don't think any of them are held accountable. There's 5 tiers. There's now 5 tiers that you could be placed in. You don't want to be on tier number 5. You don't want to be in tier number 5. And we've seen more turnover in these last, I think, few years than we saw when you and I were heading up the department too. So it's you're evaluated on everything you basically do during the regular season. So kudos to Carl and the gang. I'm sure they'll do a good job. I don't imagine that we'll have a lot of penalties, but hopefully we don't have a pass interference call at the end of the game, which could be the deciding factor of the game that people think is not a foul. But
what is that, foreshadowing? Why are you the self-fulfilling prophecy? Please.
I know. Well,
no more.
Where will I be? I'll be eating a rack of lamb somewhere enjoying.
Will you be? But will you be sober by the time that play happens?
No.
Right. You think about Super Bowl, long halftime, long lead up. That's 4.5 hours. I don't know if you're going to be.
You and I both won't make it. But anyways, hey, that's a good show. We've had a good show. Talked about a lot of things. Nothing next week. We're going to skip next Monday. We'll be back though for a post Super Bowl last call. So get on that Fox Sports app, by the way. We got some fantastic college basketball coming up. So you'll want to get on the Fox Sports app, the website, and enjoy all this great stuff that Fox give you.
For the best stories, easy to find scores, and comprehensive team pages, plus access to every live Fox Sports game and exclusive bonus cameras, download the all-new Fox Sports app now.